1 has been changed to a non-published number.
Warning, the following show contains conservative posturing, radical Christian ideas, and may offend pagans, Wiccans, Islamic fundamentalists, and other unenlightened individuals. Callers and guests may be subjected to brash and offensive comments by the hosts and any other type of bullying tactics available. But that's okay. We know why you're here.
This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
Tonight is Monday, September 22nd, 2008.
What's up, you that woe too? This is Jay Scott.
And this is Chuck Browder filling in for the very, very tardy Trent Lackey.
always tardy.
I thought I'd talk a little smack there off the top.
No, it's good, man. It's good. It's good for
gotta razz him, you know?
Have some smack talked every now and then about him. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe it'll motivate him to be on the ball.
So you believe that as much as I do?
Yeah, there's a certain element of maybe social engineering or social Darwinism associated with it.
Well, tonight
you give him enough hell, maybe he'll do something about it.
Well, what do you think of the latest poll here with Barack Obama and John McCain? The very scientific poll of how many presidential masks you sell before Halloween, determining who's going to win the presidential race.
It's usually pretty on, I'd have to say.
Well, they're saying that Obama masks are selling 2-1.
Well, he wore it on Saturday Night Live.
Well, there you go. That could be part of the reason. We want to sell his mask, make sure he gets in there. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, there's also a famous kindergarten class that does exactly the same thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they vote every 4 years on who's going to be the president. I can't remember the name of the teacher of the class, but it's a bunch of kindergartners, and I think maybe it's 2 times out of the last 50 years or something.
They've been wrong?
They've been wrong.
Have they voted yet?
No. Usually they do it, in the week leading up to the election. So I look for it there in the end of October, the first week in November.
I'm glad we're using scientific.
They're very good bellwethers, I have to say. That's just like Ohio. The Republicans, I don't think in the last 150 years have managed to clinch the national election without winning Ohio.
We'll see. Anyway, tonight our guest is Walter Bosley. He's written a book with Greg Bishop called Latitude 33, Key to the Kingdom, an investigation into the arcane science and hermetic engineering of Disneyland. So I thought this was
Walt Disney. He was a pretty twisted cat.
I know, and I knew you would like this when I saw this, and I'm like, man, this is definitely something we'd be interested in talking about. And I really, unfortunately, haven't had a chance to do anything but glance at it. But I will get around to reading the whole thing. But why talk about it when we can talk to the man that wrote it?
We got the author of the book itself on the line.
That's right.
Here.
His former 20-year national security professional, counterintelligence specialist for the FBI, and special agent with AFOSI. I don't know what that is. He'll explain it to us. And also does
sounds like an intelligence agency or something.
Oh yeah, special agent. Ding ding ding. Also a personal security anti-terrorism consultant for clients in global venues. Let's welcome Walter Bosley. How are you, Walter?
Hey, I'm doing great, guys.
What is AFOSI?
That is the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation.
How did I miss this with the whole ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence?
Yeah, but especially if you've got any listeners, if you ever talk about UFO stuff, Air Force OSI is quite often on the list of the bad guys, keeping away from the people.
So you're the man.
Yeah, I'm the man, and my distinguished career of just with one crazy book about Disneyland, I guess I'm just throwing it all away. Huh?
Well, nothing wrong with that. Because I should have known that. I believe I studied with a guy, U.S. terrorism class I took. He was a doctor, and he had worked for Air Force intelligence. So most likely he was, I guess, one of your colleagues.
Air Force intelligence, particularly in what I did in OSI. A lot of the guys are, when I say just criminal investigators, they handle typically what you think of as crime, I was in the intelligence, counterintelligence division, so yeah, we would work with the intelligence units, not as close all the time, but yeah, we were kind of in the same pool.
No, that's great. It reminds me of that. Who was that? The deputy director of the Navy in the mid '80s. Bill. He wrote that book. What was it? Over the Pale Horse, or I don't know. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about. The guy that was gunned down by the cops over.
It was on an Indian reservation, maybe.
William Cooper.
Bill Cooper. That's right.
Yeah, Bill Cooper.
Yeah, and I don't know. It sounds like your book may be in about the same vein. Hopefully, we don't hear anything nasty like that about you here in the near future.
Oh, geez, I hope not. I hope not. I may be late with them occasionally, but I pay my taxes, and I think that's what his dispute was.
Oh, he was one of those. What do they call the guys?
The separatists.
Freedmen.
Yeah.
Yeah. They say that the gold, like. I don't know how true this is.
That's some serious anti-federalist leanings right there.
The gold around the flag in the courthouse, they were telling me it's some kind of,
Exactly. Well, with
the Constitution doesn't apply in here because of that.
Exactly. You read his book, though, and you never know. What we're hearing just could be the cover story,
That could be. I believe about anything nowadays. So, Latitude 33, Key to the Kingdom. Who is this Greg Bishop guy?
Who is this Greg Bishop guy? Greg Bishop is a lot more, he's better known than I am, that's for sure, in UFO circles, people that are, into the UFO and other strange phenomena. He was the editor of a magazine called The Excluded Middle for several years. He speaks at a lot of UFO conferences. He is a good friend of mine, and I sit in on his podcast show frequently. And
you can plug it here. We don't mind.
What's that?
I said you can go ahead and plug it. We don't mind.
I'm just saying that's how I kind of got started with him, and that's how the book started. Was we were sitting there on his show just BSing, and the question came up, hey, why is Club 33 called Club 33? And we were looking around, and he pulled it up on the Wikipedia there that it was at latitude 33. Specifically 33.8118, and we were because we're a couple of guys into ley lines and things like that, so that had significance.
Okay, well,
Greg he speaks at a lot of UFO conferences. He's the author of Project Beta, a best-selling book about the Air Force and how they were involved in the Paul Benowitz affair. If you're familiar with that,
I'm not. I've gotten away from UFOs for so long.
Me too.
So, but definitely sounds interesting. We'll have to have him on sometime.
Yeah, he'd probably be more interesting than me.
Oh, come on now. But this is your night to shine. Tell us what's the deal here with this Keys to the Kingdom. What is the deal with this Hermetic Engineering of Disneyland?
Well, basically, I want to start by saying, and first of all, I appreciate you guys putting me on this show because there's been some instances, I think, of other people shying away because their fear of the mouth. They're afraid Disney's going to, sue them or, come after them just because anything about Disneyland that they don't approve and package themselves. And I love Disneyland. I mean, I was a big Disney fan when I was a kid and everything. So, to me, all this that I'm talking about, for me, it's a positive thing about Disneyland. That if this were done, I think it's fascinating and it's a positive thing. But basically, in a nutshell, what I'm presenting here is that Disneyland was built as a psychotronic device intended to expand human consciousness.
Whoa! So it's like a part, I don't know, like an altered consciousness or altered state that the structure has been built for. Yes, that's essentially, in a word, yes, that's what I'm saying. It was constructed in a way that when properly functioning, and I say properly because if you read in the book, the device has been disengaged. It was disengaged in 1982.
Aww.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
And
Must have been Epcot.
yeah, if properly operating, what it does is it raises your level of awareness to to a wider spectrum of reality, as it were. But also, it can open portals, potentially, interdimensionally.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
No need to bring LSD to Disneyland.
There's already enough altered states there.
Drugs, right?
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. So we're talking about like maybe some like Nazi era, portal things going on.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I can think of.
Reverse engineered Nazi technology or something. Yeah, that is some strange concepts right there.
Yeah, Joseph Farrell, who's an author, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's written extensively on the Bell and other Nazi technology, just like what you're talking about. And he's a good friend of mine, and he's in the book. I discuss certain aspects of what's going on at Disneyland with him. And you're absolutely right. The same things that the Nazis were playing around with are the same technologies and ideas that were utilized in this device that was built into the park.
Wow. Well, and I hate to cut you off, especially since we didn't start. We started really late, but we're going to take our break here. We're at the bottom of the hour. If you'll hang tight with us, you're listening to World of the Unexplained. Trent Lackey just walked in the door, so we're going to be back with Trent, myself, and Walter here in just a second. We'll see you in a bit.
Welcome back. This is the soothing voice of Dr. T. I don't know why I said that. This is Trent, and welcome to World of the Unexplained. We got Walter Bosley on tonight. Keys to the Kingdom, and the number is 1-877-722-7382, or scare you too. The local number is 336-996-1596.
Call if you dare.
That's kind of interesting because we got sevens mainly in the first number and then sixes.
Sixes in the last.
I say it a lot, but it's always interesting.
Oh yeah.
Not really. Okay. All right, Walter. Well, let's just begin with the begin. Where did this start for you? All this investigation and whatnot.
Well, back in '80. I think it would have been March of '80, I believe. I go to Disneyland with some friends. I'm in high school, junior in high school. I go to Disneyland with some friends, and I got to tell you, back then, I don't know how old you guys are, but back then...
we graduated high school in '94, roughly.
Oh, you youngsters. Okay. Okay. So you were a wee lad.
A wee lad, yes.
So back then at Disneyland, and this is one of the aspects where it was the good old days at Disneyland, if you went to Disneyland, say in February or March, on a Wednesday night, okay, by 7 o'clock, if it was open till 9, but by 6 or 7 o'clock, you could be walking around and hardly see anybody there in the last couple hours the park's open, and that's the way it was. This particular night, I went with my friends, and it was in the 9 o'clock hour, somewhere between 9 and 9:30, and we got on the carousel.
Okay.
We'd done everything else ad nauseum. Now, this was back in the days when they still had the ticket books, so if you wanted to ride unlimited, you had to get what was called the passport. And with the passport ticket works pretty much like admission works today, where you just pay and you can ride whatever you want as often as you want. But in those days, there were still the ticket books, and by that time I was buying the passports, and it was easier just to, pin the passport somewhere on your person so you didn't have to keep pulling it out.
Sure.
So we go on the carousel because we've done everything else a million times, and why not? And we're riding the carousel, and I see this old man, white hair, a beard, snow white, and he's wearing a black suit with a white shirt, no tie, and he's standing there, for those familiar with the park, between where Dumbo is and, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. There's kind of the path continues on past Alice and over to the Matterhorn. He's standing about that area right off the carousel, and he's just watching the carousel, just watching it go around, and And about
creepy old pedophile, right? I'm listening.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You know what? I never thought of that. That might explain.
Look at the little kitties on the ride.
Shoot. Oh well, so much for that. So I last couple times I go around, I don't see him, and we get off the carousel and we head on this path I'm talking about over towards the Matterhorn, and there the old guy is sitting on a bench, and this is. Once you get into all the stuff I've written about, you see where this is very significant. At the time, it was just one of those, I'm a kid, and I'm like, I think I'm just compelled to go up and talk to this old man. And he's sitting on the bench there, and I had two friends with me that witnessed all of this. And I go over and I approach the old man, and, basically the small chit-chat, hey, you having fun? Is this your first time here? He says, oh, yes, yeah, it's my very first time here. And he seemed to have this mood of amazement, in which was significant later in my research. He just seemed to be amazed at everything he saw at Disneyland, and he had wanted to ride more, but he had run out of tickets. He said he was all. I think he had like an A ticket, which we could get him on Small World. So again, oddly enough, I just felt compelled to. Me and my friends, we went and rode It's a Small World with this old guy. Said his name was Alfred. And we ride Small World. He's just in awe, looking at, everything in the ride and everything, around Disneyland. And when we come back, I look at my watch, and the park's going to close in a little over an hour. I've been there all day, and I just felt compelled to give him my passport. And so, I told him, hey, you know what? And I took it off me, and I pinned it on his lapel. I said, hey, with this, you can go ride whatever you want, as many times as you want. You still have over an hour. I come here all the time. You go have fun. This old guy was just thrilled that I gave him my ticket. I mean, he was just, oh, thank you, and just, beside himself with gratitude. And I'm like, oh, okay, gave me the warm fuzzy, being nice to my elders.
Sure.
And my friends and I spent the last hour, just goofing around kind of stuff. And I came away from it thinking, yeah, that was just one of those nice little episodes in life. And, nothing more to it than, gee, in that instance, I was a great guy. Years later, ask one of my ex-wives, they'll tell you something different. But, it's just your typical feel-good kind of moment. So, zip ahead to 1992. I'm working for the FBI in Manhattan.
I'm sorry. No.
And no, it was a pretty cool job actually. And
you're working for the man. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
In the intervening years between that Disneyland encounter with Alfred, the white-haired man, and 1992, I had learned quite a bit more about the world of the unexplained, to borrow the title here. I had experienced quite a bit more strange things. So in 92, I was very much interested, you might say, and during my lunch break there, I went to a bookstore. I don't even know if it's still there or not, down from Columbus Circle, the Coliseum bookstore in Manhattan, and happened to pick up a book that was about these things called ley lines, which I had only heard about once before in another book that had to do with UFOs. And all I knew at that point was that ley lines were these strange energy grid lines that crisscross the planet, and these researchers had done some analysis and found that the greatest majority of strange phenomena, occurrences, and reports, be it UFOs, ghosts, whatever, seem to occur at the intersections of these ley lines. And that was the extent of my knowledge of this ley line business, and I'd learned it a few years before in the late 80s. So I'm looking at this book in 1992 in this bookstore in Manhattan, and it's about the guy who is credited and originally discovered these ley lines, and he wrote this book in 1925. He discovered them in 1921. And I'm looking at this, and I look at the author, and the author's name is Alfred Watkins.
Oh, don't tell me.
Well, I opened the book, and there is a full-page photo, and I'm telling you, the bumps on my skin crawled. Wait
a minute. 1925, you wrote the book?
He wrote the book in 1925. He died in 1935.
Ooh.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I'm looking at this photo, and guys, I'm telling you to this day, That's the man that I met at Disneyland.
Oh,
Dude,
wow.
now I'm going to Disneyland for the very first time with my wife this summer. This summer, if I run into this guy, it's going to creep me out. But go ahead.
Well, you can't because, as I told you, and as I'll explain later, they disengaged it.
We have a caller on right now. We got our old pal Ron from Mexico. No, I'm just kidding. Ron from
Ron Paul Hunter from Raleigh.
Paul Hunter, RPH. Hey, Ron.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. What's your question for Walter?
Well, Walter, I just wanted to hear a little bit more, and something just jumped into my mind right there towards the end. When you're talking about ley lines, for a person like me that's not familiar with them, ley lines for what? Are they ley lines for a temple? Are they lines that just lay on the face of the earth? Are they lined up with anything? What, can you expound a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm using the term ley line in the familiar. Technically, the lines I'm talking about, and the lines that most people, when they talk about energy and strange phenomena, are not specifically what the exact definition of ley lines were. Now, Watkins, he discovered the actual lines that run between temples, how temples are aligned. In his particular case, it was all over England and then, of course, extended into Europe. However, he was also aware of and also studying their association with a grid of natural energy lines that covers the entire Earth. But yeah, technically, if you're gonna be really technical, the ley lines are those lines which are the kind of like the surveying lines that temples were laid out on purpose, and those are strange enough as it is, the fact that they did that. Another term that's used for the lines I'm talking about is mascons, massive concentrations. And, I am not a scientist myself, so I'm just going to jump across a bunch of verbiage to say that mascons, as I understand them, as I'm using them here and writing about and studying, are a natural web of energy kind of laid over and in the surface of the Earth, the land masses. And
mascons can be a lot of things, but what they're usually talk about, I believe, when you talk about mascons, are gravitational anomalies. And that means that there's a consistency of the Earth's crust that is a certain chemical formula for the most part. And there are areas where there's either more or less mass, and that mass could be from a metallic inclusion, an igneous intrusion,
sure,
things like that. Or it could be an area where there's just for example, could be having an impact, and some of the material could have been removed, and that would leave a vibration in the Earth's gravity that could be detected with a flyover. And actually, I think they make very accurate maps of that because they did the Chicxulub crater in Yucatan that way, I believe.
Ron, you're breaking up on us. What do you read in your spare time?
My gosh. That's pretty cool, but quite scientific.
I want to say that, like I said, and I apologize for not knowing, exactly how to technically define, these specific things, because I'm the quintessential end user. Okay, but what I'm talking about uses whatever these mascons are, whatever these ley lines are. They are part of a planetary grid system, and there have been individuals who have been tapping into whatever this system is, technologically or whatever, geophysically. It's there. It's there, and it is being used and tapped into, however you describe it or define it. I had one. It's like, for instance, the gravity well issue. The gravity well issue comes up in that Disneyland was built in a bowl. A bowl was dug out of the earth to set the park down into. And what they did was they used the principle of a gravity well and kind of created their own, as it were, or at least to try and create some of the same effect that's in a gravity well. And their application.
It depends on how things would be focused, and that's sort of when I called in. My original set of questions it's about this device. Obviously, if you call it a device, you can't say what it is, or otherwise we would call it whatever it is. But are we talking about something that generates electromagnetic energy, or are we talking about something that disturbs physics in another way?
We're talking about something that certainly uses electromagnetic energy, and indeed has an effect on physics, because I believe, as the book presents, that it very possibly opens up a wider spectrum of reality to the observer.
I see. Well, I mean, I can think of one common lay example would be like static electricity. Something that generated just static electricity would be very benign if that's what the intent was for the participating audience in a recreational park. That feeling you get when the hackles on the back of your neck rise and you start to feel alert. I think that also occurs right before an electrical strike, like during a thunderstorm. So anything that generated that type of energy on a participating public would be relatively benign. I'm not sure how easy it would be to do, but there's some experiments that I've been reading about with Nikola Tesla that was precisely sort of what he was envisioning, was a distribution of power through this tremendous waveform generation network. Is this something related to Tesla's work, do you think?
It certainly uses things Tesla understood. I'll tell you what, let me describe the device, and then maybe that'll answer a little bit more of the technological question.
Yeah, Ron, we're going to let you go and free up the lines here, okay?
Sure, guys.
All right, thanks for calling.
Thanks.
Yeah,
good questions.
I'll be around.
Okay.
All right.
All right, and that was Ron from Raleigh. Go ahead. Before you answer that question, I want to go back to the creepy story.
The what story?
The creepy story. If we got a second.
Well, the fact that the man I saw and talked to at Disneyland, who told me his name was Alfred, was the spitting image, physically, image-wise, of Alfred Watkins, and I still swear that to this day. Now, in the book, I talk about the possibilities of what that means as far as who the Alfred I met actually could have been, and I'll get into that. I'll explain that, because Go ahead.
I'm listening. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm letting you take the reins here.
Oh, okay. Well, after that, I'm looking at this book. I'm looking at this picture of Alfred Watkins, and I'm thinking, what the hell?
Yeah.
I continue. I'm real curious about this, so I start reading more about ley lines, and I learn a little bit more, but it didn't really. What Latitude 33 is, what this investigation in this book is, really didn't open up until after I own a publishing company, and I published the fiction of a man named Sechery, and he's written a novel in which Tesla, Harry Houdini, and Mark Twain go to Mars in 1893.
Oh, that's pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really based on a lot of historical stuff. I mean, he writes what's called fantastic realism, in which he takes a bunch of history and he puts a dash of the fantastic in it.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
So that it's even more believable, because you go back and you look and you go, wow, he really was there, he really knew this person, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, he really has studied, he's a geomorphologist, as well as being an author, and he has really studied this for about 30 years now. And after I got to talking to him about these ley lines, and then when Greg and I were talking about it, and we looked it up and found that, hey, Disneyland is located in Latitude 33. Now, what that refers to, the importance of that is that there are some interesting things that have been built and that occur between 30 and 40 degrees latitude north around the globe. The Great Pyramid is in that zone. The Bermuda Triangle, just all sorts of weird things. Strange, questionable things have happened. If you're familiar with James Shelby Downard's Killing of the King ritual connection to the JFK assassination, Dallas is at this latitude 33. Mm-hmm. It's specifically for the people that are, freaks about detail. It's at 32.8 something, but you get the point.
Yeah.
It's close.
Close enough.
Yeah, it's awfully close.
Yeah. So we're looking at this, and I decide, well, I'm going to look deeper into Disneyland, what's going on with Disneyland? I had the experience there with this Alfred guy who I think was Alfred Watkins, and wow, when I started looking into the history of Disneyland itself, and, I've been to the park countless times throughout my life. I went back, and I was amazed at what jumped out at me, and I was amazed at some of the things I found, the biggest being that SRI, Stanford Research Institute, a think tank which has been involved with some amazing technological things like GPS, backscatter radar, all this advanced government type, Department of Defense technology. It was an engineer of theirs who was hired by the Disneys to be the physical engineer of Disneyland when they first wanted to build it, and that's a gentleman named C.V. Wood. And when I got into C.V. Wood, that's when really things started coming together, that there was something funny going on at the Magic Kingdom.
Maybe there was some real magic going on in the Magic Kingdom.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that's horrible.
And we're gonna stop right there for our break at the top of the hour. You're listening to World of the Unexplained. We're speaking with Walter Bosley tonight. Give us a call 877-722-7382, 877-SCARE-U2. We'll return after this. And we're back on World of the Unexplained. Walter Bosley. We're talking about all kinds of crazy things. If you're planning on going to Disneyland, well, I guess you can go now. I guess there's no craziness going on anymore. Well, tell us more, Walter. I'm giving
numbers.
you, 877 scare you too. I'm giving you the reins tonight, just to take us where you want to.
Oh, okay. Well, let me, since we're time is flying by, it always seems. I probably should explain what this device is and how basically it worked.
Okay.
Again, it was designed by C.V. Wood, who's an interesting man in himself. He passed away the very year that I discovered the Alfred Watkins book, 92. And by the way, C.V. Wood was born the same year that Alfred Watkins was first discovering the ley lines. There's some synchronicity for me. But anyway, here it is, basically. Disneyland, the way C.V. Wood engineered it, was built in essentially a bowl. Now, it's not perfectly round-shaped. It's like a triangle with rounded corners. And it sets down in the bottom of this bowl, and it has a berm around it. Now, the practical reason they did that was, they wanted you to feel like you were away from the outside world in Disneyland, the world of Disney. An interesting little fact I learned that was huge when I learned it is that of the ley lines that run through California, there is one place that has an intersection of 3 ley lines. No other place has that many. There's intersections of 2, but there's not another place in Southern California with an intersection of 3 ley lines except in Anaheim on the Disneyland property, specifically in Fantasyland, and that is exactly where C.V. Wood had them place the carousel.
Okay, now wait a minute. We're talking about the Disneyland in California versus the Disney World in Florida, correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, see, I'm going to miss it anyway. I'm going to Florida.
Yeah,
fine.
Oh,
well. Anyway, go ahead.
Now, the carousel was the operative part of this device. If you've studied, Theo Pymans has written a book on John Worrell Keeley, which I strongly recommend. If you're familiar with the works of John Keeley, if you're familiar with the works of Tesla, and also the work of Victor Schauberger, who was the German engineer who was working with them during the pre-World War II years when they were allegedly developing UFO technology, anti-gravity technology. Now, if you're familiar with the Bell, the device that Joseph Farrell has written about extensively in I believe, Nick Cook and Igor Kwiatkowski, it was a device that it would spin. It would spin rapidly. They would pump this stuff in between the layers, and it was the spin that created some strange effects in physics. You might call them strange effects. You really got to read their stuff. I can't sum it all up in just a sentence. But basically, Keeley, Tesla, Schauberger, anybody who's messed with this stuff, the people who developed the bell, they learned that when you put a spinning device on a ley line, particularly on intersection of ley lines, you get potentially extraordinary results. Now, C.V. Wood, who came from SRI, Stanford Research Institute, which definitely, if there's an outfit that understood what the Germans were secretly doing in World War II, SRI is one of them, okay? Now, C.V. Wood, he drops this park, he builds it in a bowl, digs a bowl out, thus creating an artificial gravity well, okay? And that's all he needed to do for all the techno geeks out there that want to, tell me, well, that's not possible. It worked. Effectively, he created an artificial gravity well. And where those three ley lines intersected, he put the carousel. Now, the carousel, spinning device, right?
Yeah.
For the hours of the day that park is operating, that carousel's constantly spinning around. And what we believe the device did was, as the carousel spun around directly centered over the intersection of those three ley lines, it generated this energy that then flowed and spiraled out from the carousel through the ley lines as they went from the intersection and continued on, and spread this energy, this power, throughout the park. And the energy then would gather in the berms and kind of, for all intents and purposes, kind of stop there so that it would all gather up in the berm, in the bowl that is Disneyland. Now, what's interesting is Disneyland, most people that go, they describe the experience of, wow, I just feel like I'm in another world. I just feel like a kid, and it just seems I lose track of time, that kind of thing. It's just so great. And I got to tell you, having gone to that park in Anaheim all my life, that feeling, waned a great deal starting in the mid-'80s. And I never feel it now. And I thought at first, well, you're an adult, you're getting older, and I thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But when I learned about this, I thought, well, that's got to be a contributing factor if this stuff, it truly does affect us.
No, so do you, have you? When was the last time you went to Disney World? Disneyland, excuse me.
Disneyland, I believe was in 2006 or early 2007. I think early 2007.
I'm just wondering if you were to show up there today, if they would kindly ask you to leave.
Oh, no. No, see, they don't work that way.
Okay.
Oh, no.
It's much more subtle. Basically with this book, I had a couple of publishers, one, and I won't name them, because I know these guys, but, one of these publishers was really interested. Let me put it to you this way. I'm a publisher myself, and the discussions we were having are the kind you have when essentially a company wants to publish your book, okay?
Sure.
I mean, it was going that route. And then at the last minute, there was this tap dancing, and suddenly they weren't interested. Now, a book that's goes into much greater detail on these ley lines and how this whole thing works, a book by Sechery, which has had, a difficult road to get published. There was another publisher who was, committed to publishing his book and then backed out and then acted like, well, where did you get the idea that I was going to publish this book? I mean, it shocked us. We went from that publisher saying, yeah, go ahead and say publicly that you're going to be published by, my company, to, gee, where did you get the idea I was interested in your book? And I believe it's fear of the mouse. They look at it and they're like, oh my God, the Disney mafia is going to come after me. But anyway, I'm sorry. That's a digression, but it's part of the history of this book. I've encountered interesting. It's interesting who ignores me, and
who doesn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty strange. I was going to ask a question about the technicalities of this device, and basically the way I understand it, the way you're describing it, the carousel is channeling the energy from the three segments of the ley line that's all intersecting at one point. It's generating out in sort of like a spiral fashion, like a reverse whirlpool. I mean, that's how I see it in my mind anyway. Bounces on these berms on the edges of Disneyland, and then just sort of pools and collects and like ricochets and just builds in in that spot. I mean, I'm no physicist or anything like that. How do they propose to keep that, whatever that energy is, in Disneyland from spilling over? You know, if it's keeping on channeling stuff out over and over again, it's collecting in that gravity well like you're talking about. How is it not spreading beyond the berm out into the rest of the neighboring area?
Well, it all has to do with the nature of the bowl that they created. You know, C.V. Wood, you know, being the engineer, he apparently knew how deep to make it, what angles to make it on. He seemed to know how it worked. He seemed to know how to, you know, construct the berm in a way that it would, just kind of deflect back and just kind of stay stored in there. Now, that's not to say that a little bit doesn't spill out. And when you think about it, it's not a bad thing they're doing, so they probably weren't concerned about it as long as they stored enough. This concept has also been looked at there's this book called Needles of Stone by a guy named Tom Graves. And he did an experiment because his theory is that circles of stones have bands of alternating charge, and energy is derived from the center of the circle and transmitted concentrically outward. Now, this is not, you know, the Disneyland device works in a spiral, which is very much in tune with the way nature would do it. But Graves did an experiment where he took a center stone and these circles of stones, and he released a pulse of energy in the center stone, and it traveled for 6 miles to another stone, and he measured this. So he tested that this does work, but I believe it's the depth of the bowl, it's the angle, you know, of the berm, and just I mean, C.V. Wood's the kind of guy that he probably understood the rate of spin of the carousel and how much, you know, the weight of the carousel on top of this intersection. And, you know, it was probably a very measured, precise thing.
No, why did they turn this? Why did they turn this thing off?
Yeah,
that's a good question. That really goes into some other things that I don't get into in the book. But for practical reasons, they wanted to kind of give a facelift to Fantasyland and to the park in general. So in 1982 is when they rebuilt Fantasyland. And the carousel got moved back several feet, and they gave, you know, a new facelift to the structures there. They put in a couple of new rides, and you know, among all this, there's all the symbolism and the fairy lore and stuff that works in conjunction with the device as a transcendental with transcendental alchemy that works on the human psyche. What's interesting is they put that stuff in there, yet they moved the carousel, which is the operative piece of the device. And what's really interesting is our measurements and where we believe the intersection actually is, they placed their sword in the stone, which relates to their King Arthur movie of the same title, The Sword in the Stone. They placed their sword in the stone exhibit, as it were, right over where the carousel used to be centered and where the intersection of the ley lines are. And we believe, myself and Greg and a couple of the people that gave us, you know, technical advice on this, is that sword is a symbolic key locking the device. We believe that somebody was aware of what they were doing by moving that carousel back, and the sword is pointing, here it is, right here. Now, what's interesting is in front of, if you stand between the castle and the carousel with your back to the castle, and you're standing in front of the sword in the stone, which is directly right there at the carousel, there is a hedge a garden hedge on the ground. And what's interesting is it's in kind of a sine wave type of design. One of my researchers said, wow, it kind of looks like the square and compass thing of masonry. Somebody else said, you know, I thought the sine wave thing. But what's interesting is that symbol, it's a zigzag, which could be a symbol for there is, you know, energy here, there's a ley line here, and the sword in the stone the sword is pointing down, and the sword being in the stone itself symbolizes, this is locked, but underneath here is where it is. This, again, is my theory based on, what I see and what I know about how this thing would work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the FBI doesn't generally hire people that aren't intelligent. I mean,
Well, thank you.
Obviously, you've given it a lot of thought and you've done a lot of research before you come up with this idea.
And I do want to say, to answer your question, why did they disengage it? I think that here's the deal. Between the time the park opened and the time they closed it, 27 years passed. And I think that the new people, Walt Disney had died in 66, December of 66, and a new regime was coming in. Times were changing, and they wanted to go in a different direction with the company. And I think, and of course I'm tap dancing here a little bit because there is something bigger here that I don't want to go into that has to do with, okay, it was okay for 27 years to let people come into this park experience the effects of this device, but now we don't want people experiencing this. We don't want people getting their awareness expanded. We just want them to come here, spend their money, just kind of get their mind off their
day-to-day
troubles for a few hours for one day and then go away.
Sharing a huge profit in the process. Why? That's my question. First of all, the first why is, why did they build it? Now, maybe you went into it before I got here, but why would they, why did Disney pick this place and design this thing?
Yeah.
Or have you gone over this already?
No, not really, but
but why would they do that in the first place? And I guess the second question would be, why would they stop it?
I think it goes back to the Disneys, they, based on what they researched and what they were told about, Orange County, specifically Anaheim, there's going to be a lot of expansion. There's going to be a boom here. It's a good central location because, from the Inland Empire, it's only about a 40-minute drive to Disneyland when there's no traffic. And, from downtown L.A., it's only like 30 minutes. So it was a good central location, but the specific piece of property I learned was selected by this C.V. Wood. Now, I learned this from individuals who knew him personally, was friends with his son and other research. And C.V. Wood, this mysterious engineer, is the one who picked the specific piece of land. And I believe if anybody would have known about these ley line intersections, SRI definitely is an organization that would have.
Wait a minute, is this Cornelius Vanderbilt Wood?
Yes.
Okay.
What?
Don't you love fact checkers? Aren't they cool? Anyway, makes me sound smart.
Who brought London Bridge to Arizona, and he won a Chili championship with Carroll Shelby, the car designer. An interesting guy.
Related to Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
he was the one who purchased the land, and I believe he kind of did this greatly on his own. I'm not sure if Walt was aware of it. There's a rumor out there. I mean, you could get 25 people who call in and say, Walt Disney, he was a 33rd degree master mason.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That's not true. I contacted, I'm a mason myself, and I contacted two, major lodges, national level kind of things, and all records were checked. Walt Disney was never a 33rd degree master mason.
But are you a 33rd degree mason?
I'm a third degree guy.
Okay.
Walt Disney was a teenager in D. Malay, and that's where it ended. So all this stuff about Disney being a mason's a bunch of crap. It's not true. But here's the deal. I think Walt Disney was definitely a guy who would have been open to this, but here's an interesting fact. You will find little to zero mention of C.V. Wood in the biographical material published about Walt Disney. Very little. And then what you do find is so superficial, so basic, and it always involves that there was a falling out between the two men. Now, I found that interesting. That it doesn't say what the... Some people say the falling out was is that he was going around saying he was the guy who created Disneyland, and Disney didn't like that. I think there was a little more to it. But it's interesting how for years his name was never mentioned. And this is the man who did engineer the building of the greatest amusement park on Earth, the most famous one, essentially. And that's kind of telling there. But I would say greatly, C.V. Wood, and as my book shows, he had a personal interest in strange phenomena and psychic things. He wrote the introduction to a book about a psychic who was very famous back then in the 60s named Peter Herkos, who appeared in the movie The Boston Strangler as himself. And, I mean, he was a famous psychic back then. And C.V. Wood wrote the intro to the book. Also, I learned C.V. Wood was one of the founding members of something called the Mind Science Foundation, okay, formed with a guy who was once top dog at SRI. And this Mind Science Foundation, they're involved in all sorts of consciousness expanding experimentation and research, okay? It's very interesting that their forte is the very thing that this device would have done, and C.V. Wood was one of their executive officers when they were founded. Now, as an investigator, that's when I point to skeptics, I point to all this, and I go, come on, come on, guys. We're all about the preponderance of evidence, and in all honesty, when you read the book, you'll see that the preponderance of evidence is in favor that something like this was being experimented with. And I think the reason it was disengaged was, superficial reason. Hey, we just want to redesign Fantasyland, and, somebody there probably who was aware of this might have been the one involved with putting the sword in the stone where it's at so that others who were aware would recognize what they're seeing. Now, I want to say this, too, as I say in the book, quite frankly, and I love the place, but quite frankly, since it was disengaged, since the mid to late 80s, I have found Disneyland to be kind of going downhill. I mean, they cannot argue. They can't yell and scream and sue me. It's a fact. I went there early 2007, and, Tomorrowland is like a ghost town. There's half the stuff's not working. They've taken out, they took out for example, the submarine voyage, which is something, adults liked as well as kids. And, of course, they put in just another thing to promote another DVD they want to sell, and that's the Finding Nemo ride. Yeah. It's a ghost of itself.
What about Euro Disney? Is that built on one of those ley lines by any chance?
Euro Disney here's the interesting thing. The most successful Disney parks are in the 30 to 40 range, like I'm talking about, close to Latitude 33. But the parks that are not in that range tend to not have been so successful. And Euro Disney is way out of it. It's in the 50-something. And, it's been troubled since its beginning. So it is kind of interesting how it seems to work best in that special zone. And I think C.V. Wood knew that and understood it, and that's why he did what he did.
Well, tell me about the ghost thing. I want to hear about that. You'd mentioned something about that.
One of the earliest aspects of the research that I discovered is the hauntings at Disneyland. And there's a couple of researchers who really were instrumental, Marla and Kevin James of Anaheim. They really know all about all the ghosts at Disneyland, and from them I learned that there is some couple of kids who haunt Tom Sawyer's Island. There's a lady who haunts the Matterhorn, and I found out a woman died on the Matterhorn. I found out that 2 young high school guys died in the river because they were, after hours, going to swim across to the river, and for whatever reason had trouble, and one of them drowned. And another boy, I can't remember how he died, but at the moment they've had employees, a couple of employees die. There was the young lady who got crushed in the wall of America Sings as it spins around. And
what a way to go.
Yeah. Here's an interesting thing. When somebody dies in Disneyland, the emergency response people will not declare the death until they're at Anaheim General Hospital. Yeah, wow. Unless you get your head chopped off.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
You know, there's no arguing there. But for the most part, there's been a lot more people die in the park. Now, you know, and it's not the park's fault. You know, somebody has a heart attack or somebody's doing something stupid, you know, and falls off something. But in some cases, you know, when a ride breaks, you know, yeah, that's wow. But what it means is there's potentially a lot more spirits walking around there.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's an interesting point. I mean, I wonder, for example, you know, ley lines are a source of energy, and they always say spirits manifest and feed off of energy. And, you know, a lot of very sacred ancient sites are built on the intersections of these places.
Yeah.
Who's to say that, you know, someone's, you know, if I'm going to go out there in that direction, that somebody's spiritual essence is sitting there basically feeding off where the lines cross. And then also, here's another thing. I wonder how many, you know, the proportion of deaths in Disneyland versus other amusement parks. And then, you know, I'm sure there's some kind of a possibly connection there. I don't know. But I wonder if Disneyland's a little more haunted than other amusement parks simply because of what you speak of, you know, that the lines are crossing there at that Sword in the Stone.
Well, you know, what's interesting, you mentioned other parks. C.V. Wood designed several other amusement parks.
Oh, yeah.
And the only one that remains to this day, other than Disneyland, that is still a success is the original Six Flags.
Where is that? Where's the original?
What's that?
Is it in Chicago, the original Six Flags?
No, the original Six Flags is in Arlington, Texas.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
there is an intersection of ley lines smack dab in Arlington.
Is it built in a bowl?
I don't know. I
That's
don't know
interesting.
that, but there is a carousel there, and I believe it is located. We found out that it is located on where the ley line runs through, and C.V. Wood designed that park.
I mean, my gosh. I mean, this guy could have been, you know, running this experiment, you know, as much as he could. Because, I mean, you think about it, there would be a lot of people showing up there. You know, it's a massive test subject population.
Great empirical data.
You know, and really, you know, from wide variety of demographics, social classes, ethnicities, whatever you want. You know, I mean, it's the perfect proving ground or experimentation if this is where he's going to go with it. It's a fantastic site.
Look what's happened with, like what I was saying with Disneyland since they moved it. I mean, I'll tell you, up until the 90s, in recent years, I never saw paint worn off handrails. I never saw dirt accumulating, you know. You just, it's almost like some things you look at and you go, wow, the maintenance has really just gone to hell in some of the details. And I'll tell you, that never would have happened before, you know, the last, you know, decade or so, or the last 20 years. I never saw that. They would every night, you know. So what we're talking about is a vitality was given up for profit, really.
Mm-hmm.
When they moved that carousel, they stopped tapping into something that generated a vitality that I would say also affected the people running the place, because it seemed to be there was more the pride of place.
Well, what about the Florida location? What about Disney World?
I haven't. The research hasn't delved deeply into Disney World like we have Disneyland, because quite frankly, the Disney book has led into something else that I have been investigating for a little over a year now. That is just it's extraordinary. It's big, and the whole Disneyland thing is just part of it.
Okay.
And,
right.
Yeah, and I haven't ventured to Florida to follow up to see the comparisons between Disney World and Disneyland. I've been real busy, my hands full with this other thing that I discovered as a result of the Disney research, which I haven't written about or talked about anywhere yet. Well, I'm writing about it now, but I haven't published anything yet.
Okay. That's an interesting point. You know, the whole notion of Disney, you know, the Disney Corporation. I'm no real friend of it anyway. I've always.
Come on! Don't you like Mickey?
No, I don't actually. I mean, I think there's a certain element of Disney that makes me, even as a kid, I wasn't really too fond of it. And I don't know. I mean, now that I've grown up, I can kind of look back on it and look at it now, and it just seems to me like a godless, blood-sucking corporation that's trying to steal the minds of children and warp them and shape them in a way that's in my opinion, not very good. That's just my own personal opinion.
Why are we bitter at Mickey?
I'm not. I'm bitter. I'm not really bitter. I just think that they're...
Donald Duck orange juice, man? What's going on
Oh,
here?
my gosh, Scott.
You're not American, man.
Maybe I'm not. No, it's just the corporate mindset of profit over inspiration.
Well, you didn't think about that as a kid. You're telling me that Disney was turning you off as a kid. You weren't thinking about the corporate mindset of Disney as a child?
I'm sorry. I didn't really care for Disney. I was much more of a, I don't even know.
You weren't a Mouseketeer?
No, I was not. Oh my gosh, Scott, just whatever. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The Disney of the well-known CEO who recently retired from the position is exactly the Disney you're talking about that you find despicable, because it was under that individual's regime that Disney really became the nasty, dark thing that it is considered by many to be as a corporation. And I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I will say the hope, the good part is that the family members, those who have some type of, as thin as it is, some type of connection with the man whose original vision was, the story is they had enough of this and the direction the company was going, and they were instrumental in him deciding to step down in a way.
Well, the whole Disney thing ties back to the whole John Teeter time traveler thing. I don't know if you guys remember any connection there. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Oh, refresh my memory, because the name is like tickling my...
John Teeter was supposedly a time traveler that came back from the future. I don't know.
The near future.
Yeah, the near future. There were so many lines that it could have taken, so he can't really predict with any accuracy X, Y, or Z. But apparently, he's now...
From his reality.
He is now 8 or 9 years old, probably 10 by now. I don't remember when we had this guy on the show years ago. But apparently now he's like 8 or 10 in this world, and Walt Disney has something to do with something or other. They're lawyers or something. I don't remember the whole story.
Oh, that's right. Oliver Williams. That was who we
Oliver Williams. That was the guy we interviewed.
Right.
Oh, I'll have to look into that, because I think I've heard the Teeters thing once, but you're mentioning aspects of it that I hadn't heard, so I'll have to...
I believe the lawyer's name was something like Larry Haber or something like that, maybe.
We got that show up, actually.
Yeah, it's on the podcast.
It's on Libsyn.
Yeah, John Teeter, Titor.
So this guy's claiming that he traveled forward in time.
He was from the future, from the near future, and he traveled back to now.
To get like some Commodore 64 part or something really bad like that. It was something really, really terrible.
It was actually no. I think it was. It was something that was obsolete in his day.
Yeah, it was obsolete in his day, but not
common now.
in ours. Yeah, yeah, it was some chip or some piece of something that they needed.
No, that's true. There's a certain, because of the space shuttles. I understand it. No, I'm serious. The space shuttles are basically running on technology that's so many years back here.
Was C64.
No, I'm not saying that.
I was using that as an analogy, right. Chuck. I wasn't saying it was an actual chip from a Commodore 64.
But the technology that built the shuttles is not the technology that they use now, and so they're having to upgrade all the technology on the shuttles. That's basically.
Yeah, well, in his world, I think there's 5 presidents in the U.S. and there's been, nuclear weapons, mass destruction has hit the United States. Yeah, something like that.
Doom and gloom.
Doom and gloom. China became the great enemy or something.
So when did you retire from the FBI?
I didn't. Funny thing is, I've never retired from anywhere. I worked for the FBI for about 6 years, almost 6 years, and then I was on active duty with the OSI for almost 6 years. And there seems to be this devil theme, 6, 6, and 6, because then after that, I was a consultant going around the world for about almost 6 years, and so I never was with any of them long enough to retire. And unfortunately, even though I was in the employ of Uncle Sam doing pretty much of the same work for 18 years, and then I just spent a year doing background investigations for the government for people who need clearances. So 19 years in all. Gosh, you'd think that they'd just call me a journeyman and let me get a retirement from that, but it doesn't work that way.
Well. So
Chuck is pointing out that the ley line in western North Carolina is the proximity to the Biltmore estate is pretty close.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait a minute. You know what, guys? Let me grab my map. I can tell you where a whole lot more are.
Oh, okay.
Sure. That'll be fun. Yeah, because, we're talking about Mystery Hill was up there in the mountains. And the Judicola Rocks that we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
We're just talking about, Vanderbilt from the point of the Vanderbilt estate,
CV Wood, right.
all that, yeah.
Anderson Cooper.
And Anderson Cooper, 360.
Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
What? He's the son of Gloria Vanderbilt, the grandson of this guy.
No kidding.
Yeah, Anderson
How
Cooper,
weird.
grandson of C.V. Cooper.
No
Or,
kidding.
excuse me, C.V. Anderson Cooper, the son of, you said the grandson of...
D.B. Cooper?
No, excuse me, the grandson of C.V.
Of C.V. Wood?
Yeah, C.V. Wood.
Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
Where'd you hear that?
We're reading it right now.
Oh, that's interesting. What website?
We're on Wiki right now. Let's see here. Cooper was born in June 3rd, 1967 in New York City, the younger son of writer Wyatt Emery Cooper and artist, designer, and writer and heiress Gloria Vanderbilt, granddaughter of Cornelius Vanderbilt II.
Oh, Cornelius Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Not Cornelius Vanderbilt Wood.
Oh, well, my bad.
Right?
Yeah, well, hey.
Yeah, okay.
Close enough. Chuck, you got me all upset.
Located.
One of the same.
Yeah, Cornelius Vanderbilt Wood. That's anyway.
You got me excited.
So
there,
tell us on the map there. I guess since we're out of Kernersville, North Carolina, what kind of ley lines are close to us?
None.
We're in the triad between Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point. So
Okay.
that'll be kind of a fun little.
You've got a ley line going right through, coming out of, the way to describe this is, it comes out of Virginia at just east of Danville.
Okay. Know exactly
right
where that
into
is.
Greensboro, right west of High Point in Lexington, and continues on down through Salisbury and on to Charlotte and on south. And that line just goes through. There's no major intersection.
That's interesting, though. Yeah, I know exactly Danville, Greensboro, west of Lexington. You were saying, and through Salisbury too.
Yeah, just right east of Salisbury. Like there's some lakes there or something, or a river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the Yadkin River's there.
Yeah.
That's the major.
What I
river.
have is a series of maps that the geomorphologist I told you about, Sechery, he took the time to do these for me, and they're astonishing maps. They pretty much show me all the ley line flow of the entire United States, North America.
What else do we have in North Carolina? I'm sorry, that's a fun little geography thing for me.
You have total, there's two lines going through. The other one goes over through the west, the western part of the state, through Boone, and on down through Wayne.
Okay, yeah, I know where that is.
Asheville area.
See, Asheville, that's where the Vanderbilt estate is.
That's true. Biltmore House is up there. Yeah. Huh. And also Mystery Hill is very close by. And
really?
Is he related?
That does not surprise me. What you need to do is look for parks there in those places I named that have carousels. And take a ride on the carousel.
Take a ride and expand your mind.
Well, I mean, really, we could. There's a number of
fancy gap.
There's a fancy. Well, no, that's a little bit east.
So, man,
that's very interesting. We'll keep our eyes out for spinning things.
Before we go any further with that, my question is this, and what do you make of the old guy that you met that you thought was, this man?
Yeah, well, that's where this is where it gets really interesting, and I talk about this in the book, but I'll tell you here, it's one of three things. Either it was a man who looked remarkably like Alfred Watkins, whose real name was Alfred, and was totally unconscious of any of this stuff, and he just happened to go to the park as a coincidence, but he was kind of motivated by unseen forces, as it were, so that there would be a synchronicitous or a serendipitous, whatever you want to call it, meeting of he and I, so that years later I would key in, that I would remember him, and then it would open my mind up to investigating this, okay? Or, as Greg Bishop suggested, it is a tulpa. Now, a tulpa comes out of Tibetan Buddhism, and it is an entity or a being that you generate from the energy of your own imagination and other forces that actually materializes in the physical.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. Yes, right.
Yeah.
That name strikes a bell. Right, Tulpa. Yeah. Right,
Tulpa. And essentially, the combination of me riding the carousel, being on the device, and all the elements being there, and my consciousness being expanded, it drew a tulpa in the form of Alfred Watkins, so that later, when I discovered the Alfred Watkins book, I would, make the connection. Now, the third option, and any of these options are fine to me because they all involve the amazing and the extraordinary, but the third option is my personal pet option, and that is this. Alfred Watkins discovered these things in 1921, and he spent a few years before coming out with his book in 1925 investigating them. He would spend hours and days on horseback, whatever, just following these lines. He'd be out there by himself very often, just walking the lines, writing the lines, investigating them. And option number 3 is that in 1921, or sometime before he died, but around the time he wrote the book, he steps into a ley line intersection and is transported across space and time to Disneyland that night in 1981. And this would explain his being just flabbergasted and in awe of, my God, what is this place? What is this place?
This could also explain the teeter time machine in Disney. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And I have to throw in something else here. That talking about this reminded me of it is there's the fairy realm aspect of this, and that is when a being comes from, and I guess this would kind of be an option 4, when a being comes from another dimension, from what historically is called fairyland, it can take on whatever image it wants to. Now, if you look at, I didn't know this until years later, but I learned this years after my encounter with Alfred, that when you encounter one of these beings from another dimension and you give them a gift, you give them something just of your own free will,
sure,
they will respond with great elation. And apparently, according to the legend and lore, you are bestowed with the gift of a knowledge or this expansion of awareness and things like that. It's really an important thing in this lore, and I didn't learn that. And when Greg Bishop and when other people that are aware of this analyzed my experience with Alfred, my giving him my own ticket of my own free will was kind of like a rite of passage for me. That's what they were looking for. And it fits in with the lore. I wasn't aware of it at the time I did it. So it's just kind of an interesting little side note that how the event happened is just absolutely in line with all the ancient lore stories of beings from other dimensions. And there you go. My personal favorite, I like the idea that Alfred Watkins himself stepped into a
time
section of the ley line and transported.
That's my favorite one too.
I think
that's what I'd like to do.
I think all of them are pretty interesting though. Given the nature of the ley lines and what could possibly happen.
Do you have a website, Walter?
I currently have a magazine that I put out that's free to readers. I sell advertising space. It's a pulp adventure fiction and entertainment magazine called Lost Continent Library, and I promote a lot of the things I do through that, and it's at mottymorphic.com.
Can you spell that for us?
Yeah, MOTTIMORPHIC.com, mottymorphic.com, and you scroll down, you click on the covers, and you'll find the magazine. But also I promote the book I told you about, Tesla and them going to Mars, at wonderoftheworlds.com. And the second book in the trilogy is coming out called Metamorphosis, and it's astounding. It is the definitive Harry Houdini novel.
Cool.
But
that seems like
theworlds.com is that.
Now, awesome. What about this current book that you sent us a copy of? Where can people get that?
Oh, they can go to I have a Lulu storefront.
Okay.
The book is free. If you want it, it's yours. The download is free. So you just go to lulu.com and you do a search for Latitude 33. put in Greg Bishop and Walter Bosley, and you'll see there that, at the storefront, free download, click on whatever you got to click on, and on the storefront page, you'll see free PDF. And you click on that. I'm giving this book away because I want the information out there. I think it's important. I've been ignored, by certain aspects of the media, and I had a hell of a time getting this out there. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to offer this information out there for anyone and everyone who wants to read it.
Well, Walter,
that is really, really cool. Yes.
We want to have you back on. We want to give our listeners a chance to go out there, grab that, read it, and then bring some questions to you.
Hey, I would love to, absolutely take questions, after you've had a chance to, take a look at it, because you'll see there's all sorts of things in there that, will amaze you are involved in this that we didn't, it's impossible to touch on, in the initial.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just not enough time, really.
I'm thinking maybe January of next year.
Okay.
If you're up for it, that'll give everybody time, and it'll get us time to get our podcast organized as well.
That works.
And our website back together. But, we'll definitely do that. We had a great time tonight. I hope you did.
Oh, absolutely, guys. And again, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having the courage to have me on.
We laugh in the face of threats and boldness.
I'm not afraid of their
we don't care.
cruel tactics. Bring them. But it's been an excellent interview. It's very interesting stuff.
Thank you.
And like I said, we're going to go one further. We're going to have you back on the show in January, and then all those people that wish to do you ill, they can give you a call and see where they stand.
Yeah, come on, guys.
Bring it.
All right, but we're going to have to let you go. We're about out of time, so thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, sir.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was Walter Bosley. That was good stuff, man. I like that. Chuck, what do you think of that? It's crazy, man.
He's a very cool guy. In fact, I'd even like to try and book him if we could try and go away from the tangents for the other
show. Yeah, okay. We can talk to him about it. Yeah.
It's pretty cool, actually. Who would have known? But yeah, I don't know. Disney was never one of my things, and never has been. I'm sorry. I mean, maybe,
I was just messing with you.
I know you were, but you know what? Not even Warner Brothers. I mean, they're fine cartoons. I don't know.
Have you seen those shirts? Warn a brother. Have you seen?
No.
They're kind of funny.
Yeah,
it's like a little emblem.
Yeah,
Warner
I see where that's going. Really.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make the shirt, dude. I'm just telling you about it, okay?
I know. I'm just messing with you. It's cool. Actually, those Bugs Bunny episodes where they play the classical music, probably some of my favorite cartoons.
I really never liked Bugs Bunny.
No, I like those episodes with the classical music where he's the conductor and the weird stuff happens.
I never liked Bugs Bunny, and I'll be honest with you, I really never did like a lot of the Disney stuff as a child either.
I thought there was a lot of stuff going like, oh, this is kind of stupid.
Yeah, it's just I'll watch it because it's a cartoon. It's the only thing on.
Yeah, but gosh, we're out of time.
We are. I don't know who's on next week. D-booked it. We'll find out.
We got 10 seconds.
Oh, Jay Scott, you're only JD DJ on the Omni Sound Radio 1 network.
That's Trey Lackey, Kernersville, North Carolina. Small town. Talk about big things. Chuck, take us out.
We out!